Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This is the second of 5 quick wins we're outlining for the FP&A area of large power distribution organizations. In this one, we're going to be examining how you can simplify your planning model. Now, this may seem like a complicated quick win, but we've developed some techniques that allow this to be done in a matter of days. So, here's the issue. The issue is that in most organizations, there's a fairly clear statement about strategic intent. The dilemma is we then immediately move it to tactical actions and resourcing, sort of the detailed FP&A, the processes, projects, plans, and budgets. But this is a fairly big gap to close. And there's some best practices about tools to close that gap, which are all about setting strategic direction. And those are things like strategy maps, strategic performance monitoring, and so forth. We're going to take a look at that. So, in essence, the work we do is about translating strategy into action. So what we should be able to do is list your strategic objectives down one side of a spreadsheet, and their weighting, and the actions, the things that people do across the top. So in this example, this organization has organizations like sales, marketing, call center, and so forth. And we do these activities in aid of achieving these objectives. So if this process has a high impact on a highly weighted objective, by default it becomes more important. So we can score the impact of each process against each strategic objective. And it looks a bit like this. So in this example, you can see the sales department has a high impact, 5 out of 5, on this objective called provide predictable results. This cell here is simply the multiplication of 5 times 5, or 25, and that gives us a dark gray. It also has a high impact, 5 out of 5, on more products per customer. But this one is one of the core strategic objectives for this year at a weighting of 25. So now this cell is worth 125 points and is colored black. My final example is here. 3 times 5 is 15. That's a light gray. So dark gray means super critical to success. Dark gray means important. Light gray means also. So now it's easy to see the critical performance nodes. Wherever there's a black cell, we should probably have a driver in our driver-based model. But we don't need elements for all the rest of this spreadsheet, or what's now called an ontology. And not only can we score your core processes, but we can support organizations, outside suppliers, outside customers for their impact as well. So the net is we end up with these strategy points, which are earned based on the accomplishment of those activities. And that's where the core essence of the driver-based plan should be sourcing its drivers from. So what we should be able to do is, based on those key black performance nodes, if we take a look at a particular strategy, let's say strategy from new products, we can identify where those new products are, and those strategy points are what's going to drive our plan. And this bar represents the amount of impact that driver set has on our overall plan. We might have another objective like revenue from existing products, and again, we can identify what those come from and how many strategy points are at play. So now we can scale the different strategic focus points and identify where our key drivers need to come from. In fact, we can calculate the strategic impact of each driver and decide where the cutoff point is for our strategic success and plan for this year. Kind of Pareto's 80-20 rule, but with some logic on how to get you there. So for Acme Power, they had a project called Simply Does It to simplify their plan. And they looked at the number of drivers they had, which in total ended up to be almost 20,000. But the breakoff point was literally at about 1,000 drivers. And we found that the error rate looked like this. That is, as the number of drivers increased, the error rate, the failure rate of the plan got higher and higher. So eventually, of course, what happens is the model becomes so complicated that it crumbles under its own weight. In fact, we look at the benefit of each incremental driver, and it looks a bit like this. So what that means is obviously we want to target this part of the curve. And mathematically for them, it looked like about 18 drivers. And it looked like if we had those 18 drivers, we'd get about a 70% accuracy. So that was a hypothesis. We went off and tested this. And for product A, to begin with, they had 17,500 drivers if we look at their global operations. And we shifted that down to 27. Now, remember, our target was 18, so we didn't make our target, but we did make a substantial reduction. And we set some success criteria to evaluate whether these 27 drivers were useful. And there are three things we're going to look for. The plan accuracy, so we could take a look at the Simply Does It versus the old model. Prediction, in other words, how accurate was the budget versus what actually occurred, because we have the benefit of hindsight. And then lastly, agility, which is what is the amount of time it takes to change our plan. And we gave this Simply Does It an 82% score. So significantly better than the current plan at a huge reduction of cost, complexity, improvement in accuracy, and so far. Now, it wasn't tough. Based on the analysis I just showed you, which is the ontology, it took about 1 week to assess last year's plan, 2 weeks to do some desktop modeling that ended up with the 27 drivers versus 18. And so literally by the beginning of week 4, we were operational. So again, incredibly fast benefits to the organization from a process that actually wasn't that complicated to execute. Merely, they'd never tried to simplify their models before.